Okay, let's try something a little different here. Bontu's Last Reckoning. Have to have the mana base accommodate a little more. Have to I think we can get away with playing 12 black sources to support it, but we absolutely have to have them like be real black sources, not just like fetch lands, which could fetch a island, could fetch a black source. And and Watery Grave sometimes is better than a fetch land anyway, because sure, sometimes you have to take 2 early on, but then sometimes later in the game you don't have to take any damage, and sometimes later in the game, like just the, the fetch lands being completely dead if you can't afford to take the 1 damage, sometimes that makes Watery Grave better, just having to take a turn off to put it tapped. Anyway, so there is some merit to that, and our friend Creeping Tar Pit is coming back because I think if we're so like heavy on black and like I'm not really going to be cycling maybe the black cards that much, and also I just kind of miss, I think, the guaranteed value of being able to make my land drops and have like a better late game. And there are some circumstances where just hitting planeswalkers is pretty good. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe I've just been flooding a lot and I don't like losing to that. But anyway, let's. This is basically kind of the similar ideas we played before. There's one difference though. I do, in order to accommodate having to try like playing more sweepers. I could like play like 2 of these, or maybe a 3-3 split with Chalice of the Void, and I could go back to the old configuration of Spreading Seas in the sideboard and then Repeals back in the main. But instead, what I'm opting to do is I'm opting to swap the Repeals for the Spreading Seas. I think I want to try to see how this goes. If like I know that like there was a time period where the Repeals definitely helped a lot, but I do also know that I sometimes win a lot of free games with Spreading Seas, so and it does synergize well with Lurrus to the extent that if it gets discarded or the land gets blown up or abrupt decayed or whatever it is, you can get it back with Lurrus. It's a permanent based, effect. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a fairly like easy swap. I do kind of like I did like the synergy that Repeal worked together well with Deprive and made Deprive like a lot. It did make Deprive a lot stronger, no doubt about that. But like Deprive is still actually surprisingly good, Um, and Spreading Sea is actually still surprisingly good too. So like I just think that I think if I'm going to cut a card, I think Repeal for Spreading Seas probably is just the safest card. I did consider possibly putting a Nihil Spellbomb in place of the Baubles, but number one, Bauble is just way too strong with Lurrus when it's good, and number two, Spellbomb also just like it is kind of nice to have Mishra's Bauble in some matchups because you will bring Chalice in, for 1, and the majority of matchups you bring in Chalice for 1, and obviously in those matchups it's nice to have a recursion engine with Lurrus that isn't getting turned off by Chalice. And of course there are some rare cases like Living End where you're going to bring in Chalice primarily to be on 0, in which case Nihil Spellbomb can substitute as your primary draw card engine. But anyway, yeah, just Bontu's Last Reckoning. Just the thinking here is that it's pretty cheap. It's 3 mana. It's like a lot of single target removal spells are only like sometimes like a Swift End, and Hero's Downfall and stuff has been 3 mana. So I thought actually surprisingly castable, but it is a sweeper, and that's pretty critical because okay, here's the thing. Like I feel like Heliod is one of the matchups that I think is a tad bit unfavorable at least, but I think we can, with a little extra push, probably make it favorable. And I'm trying to think of how we can do that. And for a while, I thought of playing like blue removal, like Frogify. So like it's because one of the main things I noticed about Heliod is you really have to take care of the Uriok champions. Like even though we're not red and we don't necessarily care that much about the life gain or that much about the pro red or even the pro black, other than that we can't dismember it, which is actually the point. Like the point is, it's not so much that like we can't dismember it, but it's the point that why is it that we want to dismember it so bad? And so the thing is even though it doesn't really block our stuff like the red deck, even Cripping Tar Pit, which is black, it can't actually block. and even though it only really can't be targeted by Dismember, so in theory, like if it wasn't really doing anything, we wouldn't even care about dismembering it. But it absolutely is doing something, and we do actually need to remove it because it basically enables all their creatures to get out of control. And like I said, I was thinking about using blue removal like Frogify, but it's just very very mediocre in a lot of matchups where like you keep getting hit by the 1/1, and you know, it's just not perfect. It's not like, it's not bad per se, but it's not perfect. Anyway, so I just thought Bontu's Last Reckoning is pretty cheap, pretty you know. I think this is fairly justifiable, and like, sure, I mean, it could kill my creatures, but yeah, but like, you know, I play I play the deck a lot of times like a fairly control-ish deck anyway, and relatively few Merfolk. I think if we sweep a couple Silvergill Adepts and maybe even a Merfolk Trickster, if there's enough creatures on the other side of the board, particularly like a couple Tarmogoyfs or Dark Confidant or something, I think it'll be well worth it. Now, one thing that will be, I think, worth it to take note of is how much the lands tapping downside really hurts us. But I am eager to try it because it does deal with like Uriok Champion and deals with basically anything because it's not targeted. So also it's great against Boggles for that reason. You know, so anyway, we'll see. But I think I am definitely interested to see how it goes. Yeah. All right.